Good afternoon, and welcome to the final installment of our summer-long playlist, Opportunities to Make Data Work for Students in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Today, as summer is winding down, so is at least this version of our conversation about Opportunities to Every Student Succeeds Act. We're talking about privacy. We're talking about student data privacy.
Save the best for last.
Save the best for last. And it may surprise you to know that we're talking about student data privacy in conjunction with Every Student Succeeds Act, but we're going to tell you why it shouldn't be. Last week, just as a little bit of a recap, we actually highlighted the great work of the Parent-Teacher Association, who had done their own webinar that discussed stakeholder engagement requirements in ESSA that you've heard us talk about before, really important component of this new law, and they discuss explicitly how parents can and should play a role in informing the decisions made about Every Student Succeeds Act. So please check that out, and you can go to dataqualitycampaign.org/events to check out this webinar, that webinar, and our entire summer-long series. I mentioned that we were talking about privacy, but I didn't say who we are that's talking about privacy.
We're being very private.
We're being very private about it today. My name is Brendan McMahon-Parton. I'm the Associate Director for State Policy and Advocacy, joined today by my colleague Rachel, who's our Associate Director for Federal Policy and Advocacy here at DQC. It is a beautiful day outside in Washington, D.C. It's kind of like fun to wind down this summer series on such a nice day, even if we do have to be inside talking to you fine people about privacy. If you are joining us on Twitter, we encourage you to tweet along with us using hashtag ESSAOPS, that's ESSAOPPS. And if you're joining on the Hangout, you'll see there's an option for a Q&A box in the tools. If you have a question about privacy or really anything about ESSA, since we're in our culminating webinar, feel free to type a question in that box. So I want to get started, like I do every time, talking a little bit about some of the high-level thinking and opportunities that are in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Rachel, why don't you kick us off talking about some of those opportunities?
Sure. And really the reason that we're having this conversation today, and the reason we've been having these webinars over the last several weeks, is because ESSA really presents an opportunity. We all know that in certain ways the law really represents a shift in the way that our nation approaches education, and that there is this pretty noteworthy shift from federal to state level accountability. But at the same time, ESSA really preserves certain aspects of No Child Left Behind as well, most notably the use of data to understand and drive continuous improvement in our schools. So while ESSA provides some new opportunities and some new obligations, it also really represents an internal opportunity for you to think about your own education goals in your state, and really see how you can connect what your priorities are to the opportunities that are present in ESSA. And that's really the impetus for what we want to talk about today. And as Brendan mentioned, today's topic is privacy, which may not be explicitly mentioned in the law a great deal, but that doesn't mean that there aren't incredible opportunities and also some responsibilities to think about.
Right. ESSA presents so much more opportunities than just to comply with the federal requirements, and such a chance to continue conversations about education goals and how you meet them that have been going on in states. Whenever we at Data Quality Campaign talk about the Every Student Succeeds Act and the opportunities that it presents, we talk about 4 high-level things that we think everybody should be thinking about, that everybody should keep in mind as they pursue these accountability plans, creating new state report cards, all the great stuff that's in that bill. One is that ESSA is really an opportunity to reset the conversation in the state. So particularly given backlash and concern from parents and the public across things like Common Core state standards and data privacy and assessments, this is a moment to say, hey, we've heard you, and we're taking a look at the things that are working for us in the state, and we're gonna think about maybe what are some of the things that we should be doing differently. 2, and really important for us at Data Quality Campaign, is it's an opportunity to use data in different ways. Use different data in different ways, I should say. So much of the pain points of No Child Left Behind were around, it felt like reading and math scores were the end-all and be-all of accountability, of transparency, and driving continuous improvements in the state. This is such an opportunity to think about what are those really sharp set of metrics that we need to use in an accountability system? What are maybe the sub pieces that go under that that help drive continuous improvement within schools and districts? And then is there a bigger picture, more information, more indicators that we can put out for transparency? Parents, taxpayers understand how our schools are really doing. Third, and critically important, is that is particularly right now as we have this runway before accountability plans are due and before new report cards go live, the states are going to need to focus on getting their data house in order and really meeting their data system where it is. So I've heard some leaders sort of lamenting, gosh, we're going to have to collect a lot more data to implement this law. I've heard others say, oh, this is just a few tweaks within our data system. Wherever you fall within that spectrum, there are going to be new pieces of information that are asked for, and you already as a state have a lot of really useful information that you can capitalize on to be successful in how you implement ESSA. And fourth, and critically, is engage stakeholders. Not only is this required in the law, Congress said we need you to go out and engage stakeholders, talk to your communities, but I really think this is going to be that what makes or breaks the quality of how states really implement the requirements and the opportunities in the Every Student Succeeds Act. We're asking states to think about not just rounding up the usual suspects, not just going on a listening tour, but think about who hasn't been at the table in the past, and getting their feedback, getting their input. And like I said, it's not just about a listening tour. You can't just go out there and listen, but also demonstrate how you're acting on and reflecting on the information that you heard, including that if you don't use some suggestions people had, you need to talk about why. So as states are thinking about and advocates are thinking about opportunities, we've talked about some over the course of this playlist series. These 4 key takeaways. Data Quality Campaign has a handy resource called Our 4 Policy Priorities to Make Data Work for Students that'll help states get there. And while this list of recommendations was not written in response to the Every Student Succeeds Act, the recommendations in here will help states meet a lot of the data obligations in that law and go above and beyond to really think about the long game of putting data, of putting information into the hands of people in service of student learning. Just to quickly remind you, because I know you've all been studying deeply our 4 policy priorities, they are measure what matters, meaning be clear about what you want to achieve for students and make sure that you have the data to get those goals done. 2, make data use possible, provide teachers and leaders the flexibility, the training, the support they need to answer questions and take action. Be transparent and earn trust, ensure that every community understands how its schools and students are doing, why data is valuable and why it's protected, or how it's protected, I should say. And finally, guarantee access and protect privacy. Provide teachers and parents timely information on their students and make sure it is kept safe. So like I said, the recommendations in this roadmap really help states meet the requirements of ESSA and also go above and beyond to play the longer game of putting data to work for students. All right, so we mentioned you may be surprised to find that we're talking about ESSA privacy in the context of the Every Student Succeeds Act. I mean, first, as Data Quality Campaign, we would never talk about the importance and the value of data, how important it is to use that information, without also talking about how important it is to keep that data private and secure. They really just go hand in hand, good data use, good privacy and security practices. But while ESSA is not what we traditionally think of as a privacy bill, like in the vein of FERPA or even COPPA, the law does signal the importance of keeping data secure and also the importance of providing services to help educators in schools and districts really do that. So the really specific thing that we like to call out is that in Title II, ESSA allows states and districts to use that funding to train educators on how to use data while protecting privacy. This is a great signal. It wasn't that those funds couldn't be used that way before, but it just demonstrates the value of making sure that educators who are really trying to support student learning also have the skills they need to use and protect data in service of that goal of student learning. Sorry. This said, there are more than 21 different ways that states can use their Title I funding and at least 16 different options for districts to use their funding. So we are asking them to think about how do you prioritize this data literacy, privacy, and security training among this sort of bigger picture and way that we can use funds. At the end of the day, teachers in schools and districts are really the front lines of data use, the front lines of meeting parent concerns. And so making sure that they know how to use data effectively and keep it private and secure is going to go such a long way in supporting students and also helping parents understand. So that's our signal in ESSA, but the states have been signaling to us for a while that they think this is important for protecting student data privacy. So let's talk about what's been going on with that. And we've been seeing a lot of activity since 2014 in this area, but I'm interested to hear from you, Rachel. What's been happening this past legislative session in 2016?
Sure. So we certainly have seen states signaling that privacy is important to them, signaling especially in the way of introducing lots of legislation. So this year in 2016, we have seen 112 student data privacy bills introduced in 34 states. And if you can believe it, that's actually not as many as last year, but it's clearly still a really large number of bills. Privacy and how data is being used and protected and accessed is very, very much on the forefront of many legislators' minds. And in addition to those number of bills, we've also seen 16 new laws. So not only are states continuing to discuss these issues, but they're really continuing to legislate in different ways, the ways that they want to use and protect data.
So has every state in the country at least considered some sort of student data privacy legislation?
All but one. Although I will say that while legislation is a great way to keep track of what's on states' minds and how they're moving forward on privacy, it's not the only policymaking avenue at their disposal. So this is not to say that states aren't pursuing other ways of protecting privacy, and perhaps this other state that we will not name is very likely pursuing privacy through other means.
Well, every state education agency we know takes their obligation to protect students' data very seriously. This shows a legislative appetite to make sure that their laws and policies are up to date and are meeting modern challenges, right?
Exactly. And that's a big theme that we've seen this year is looking beyond the state data system and even beyond service providers that states are contracting with, and really beginning to think about student privacy and school leader privacy a bit more holistically. So we're seeing states starting to think about things like privacy around one-to-one devices or social media. And these types of broader considerations are going to be really important as states work to implement ESSA, because there is so much in there around ed tech and hiring teachers and teacher selection. So there's really a lot in that law that will require states to think about data governance and privacy a bit more
broadly. No shortage of things to consider in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Yes, for sure. Sort of continuing to unpack this, the legislative trends, but then also, we know that states have been working to keep, state education agencies, I should say, have been working hard to keep that data secure. Sometimes we hear people wonder if privacy or the privacy and security of data should it be a trade-off for being able to employ data in lots of the ways that we like to see it used in service to students? Should we be thinking of it as prohibitive to protect privacy that we also have to take away certain activities?
Short answer, no. Privacy concerns really should not prevent data from being used in service of student learning. It doesn't need to be a reason why important data work can't be done. Privacy is an incredibly important consideration, but done right, it really does not need to limit the legitimate data use that states are doing to serve their students. And in addition, a lot of the work that states are doing to think about how to protect privacy in terms of thinking about governance and data collection and the way that they want to safeguard their security, these are actually things that are both protecting privacy and actually helping the state use data more efficiently and effectively. So while of course privacy protections are an important goal in their own right, prompting states to think through data governance and data security is actually helping them use data more effectively as well in many cases.
And the flip side to that is that states really shouldn't be writing policies without also thinking about the ways they want to value and use that information.
Exactly. It's hard to make up rules if you're not even sure why you're collecting it or what the value is, right? So these sort of privacy protections, critically important, but they can't exist without the use. They wouldn't make sense.
So we talked about, I mentioned at the top, ESSA isn't really a federal privacy bill, but it's done a great job of signaling to states and districts and educators the importance of privacy. Why do you think they took this particular training approach I have some theories of my own, but on to signal the importance of privacy.
It's really wonderful to see the law pull out training in this way, because many states are developing their own data efforts and in many cases charging teachers and data leaders with more data responsibilities. And if we want them to take on these additional data roles of making data-based decisions, we need to train our educators and school leaders to use and protect the data well. I also think that calling out training as an important privacy issue in the law is really helping to acknowledge that teachers and school leaders are on the front line of data use. They're the ones who are accessing and using student data on a daily basis to serve their students. And most privacy issues and challenges that we've seen are not due to some malicious hacker. They're often just internal errors by people. Exactly. Yeah. Someone put something on a thumb drive that should have only been on a secure drive, or they leave their laptop open while they use the restroom. So a lot of these things are really just come down to training. It has a huge impact on the privacy and security of data, and really acknowledges that teachers are at the forefront both of using data, but also of communicating about data with parents. And if teachers can trust that data is being used well and being protected and they know their role, then they can communicate that to parents as well. They can really build that trust with parents that data is valuable, but that it's also being protected.
You're reminding me, sometimes when we talk about the Every Student Succeeds Act here at TQC, we acknowledge that it's a really wide sweeping data bill. Rachel mentioned at the top, it preserves the legacy of No Child Left Behind and using data to illuminate what's working for students and maybe what isn't. But one place where ESSA didn't really insert guidance or instruction is making sure that data, that individual level data, gets into the hands of teachers and parents, those closest to students. So side by side with this training about how you should protect data, just the little stuff about, thumb drives and stuff like that, teachers also need to actually have the data they need on their students in a valuable way. And this is one place where we see states can really go above and beyond. That's not about federal compliance. That's about supporting student learning. It's making sure that data gets in the hands of people who need it and they know how to use it and keep it secure. So we've covered sort of a broad range of things, teacher training. States are acting more broadly to think about how they govern and secure data systems, as well as putting some guardrails around technology and online service providers, things like that. But we can't really talk about privacy as it relates to ESSA if we don't talk about the things to consider around publicly reported data. So a huge opportunity in the Every Student Succeeds Act is for states to update their state report cards and really update the entire suite of information that they're putting out to the public and make sure that it's accessible and useful. And inherently, when you're talking about aggregate information, sometimes all the time, you have to think about how you make sure that information, even in aggregate, is kept private and confidential. One way that states traditionally have and continues to be signaled in ESSA thought about how they keep that information private is this concept of in size. So the minimum number of students in a subgroup that as small as the cell can get, basically. So if you've ever looked at a state report card, you may see a cell where they're trying to break down a certain subgroup of student by the performance, and you'll see something like N is less than 10. That means that state has decided that their N size is 10, and there may be fewer students in that subgroup, and so they're not going to report information about those students. And I think this is a conversation that a lot of states are really grappling with right now, that the feds are grappling with right now. The Department of Education is also attempting to address this in rulemaking. So what should states be thinking about in size?
Right. So what we've seen the department say so far in their rulemaking is that any state that chooses an N size of greater than 30 must also provide a justification for why they need to use a size. And while N size greater than 30 is not prohibited, it is, as you mentioned, an interesting signal about the types of numbers that they should be thinking about in determining what might be appropriate for their reporting. This is also an important time to remember that states often have different N size for what they're publicly reporting and what they're using for accountability. And that's right. Those N sizes don't need to be the same. Those are separate things that states need to consider. but that they need to consider very carefully how they're choosing those numbers and making sure that they're adequately small, that they are truly providing useful information about how students are performing, but of course taking steps to protect privacy as well. So states really need to strike that appropriate balance of making sure that they're not preventing valuable information from coming out, but are always protecting privacy. And a good way for states to accomplish that balance is to remember that choosing N size is not their only tool for protecting privacy. There are many other ways that states can be protecting privacy when they're publicly reporting information. I would direct everyone, almost as always when it comes to anything about privacy, to the Department of Education's Privacy Technical Assistance Center, PTAC. They have wonderful resources about protecting privacy, security, lots of different information and suggestions on publicly reporting data and different types of blurring or suppression techniques that states can use to make sure that they're publicly reporting information while protecting privacy. So as states think about their N size, it's a really important consideration, both for accountability and transparency, but
not the only one.
It's not the only consideration to be thinking about. It's just one tool of many.
You can see once we start getting words like blurring, I think another one is like perturbation. I can't even say it right. But there's a lot to consider, and it's complex decision making. In addition to PTAC that Rachel mentioned, it also, I believe, the Future of Privacy Forum also has a good resource on how states should be thinking about these different protections and of subgroups of students. And back to that point about accountability versus transparency and how you're thinking about N size, the Alliance for Excellence in Education earlier this summer released a great resource about that. They have some information about what each state's N size for each purposes and some recommendations about what states should be thinking about when it comes to N size. And I think they would agree that maybe 30 is a little bit of a high N size. So check those things out. So we talked about privacy. Actually, I should recap all summer. We talked about reporting, we talked about teacher quality, we talked about privacy today. We signaled to the great work that the PTA did on parent engagement. The tricky stuff around reporting per pupil expenditure at the school level in new ways. Talked about chronic absence, post-secondary enrollment. We covered a lot of information this summer throughout our playlist, and we really only scratched the surface of the Every Student Succeeds Act and some of the data opportunities that bill, that new law provides to states. I will plug that DQC will be releasing a resource in the coming weeks, digging into all of the things that we talked about during our summer playlist series and more. So stay tuned. This has really only been a teaser. And certainly we aren't the only ones that have been talking about ESSA and trying to provide states and advocates smart guidance on how you should be thinking about the big, new, exciting opportunities that ESSA provides. So thank you for tuning in and listening to what DQC has to say. And if you have other great resources or other great ideas about things that you think that states should be thinking about, feel free to send them our way. We're trying to stay on top of learning what everybody's talking about, things that states are wondering, because like I said, accountability plans are due in March, but this is a long game. States have a lot of thinking to do and a lot of work, a lot of ground to cover, as they always do when it comes to education policy, but certainly when it comes to the Every Student Succeeds Act as well. Just to put sort of a fine point on the conversation today, in 2016, but really ever, neither privacy nor effective data use can be afterthoughts. These two concepts must work in tandem to help students and to help educators. You can't really deliver effective school, effective instruction, ensure that every student succeeds anymore without at least some information, whether that be aggregate that supports the public and taxpayers, whether it be individual information in the hands of teachers and parents. We need this rich picture of student success. That's why we've talked about so many things when it comes to ESSA, because this is such the opportunity to stop thinking about that one summative test score, reading and math, that for too long became the end all and be all of student and school success, and really broaden out the picture and have more information that we need to support student learning. Yeah. Any thoughts from you?
I think I would just highlight again that this is an incredible opportunity for states. So think about your goals. Take stock of what resources are out there. Please follow up with us at any time. As Brendan mentioned, we are trying to keep an eye on not just what we're putting out, but really what's coming out of the field and what could be useful. So please take advantage of this opportunity to really make data work for your students and really do something great.
Yes. With that, thank you for tuning in. We're so glad that you joined us for our summer playlist. To watch old episodes or to learn more, you can check out Data Quality Campaign's event page. And stay tuned for further resources from DQC on opportunities to make data work for students in the Every Student Succeeds Act.